What happened after you did it with your best friend? Story 1. We did a FWB thing for about 3 years. Whenever we were both single, we'd hook up. She lived about 300 miles away. We used to sort of dance around the possibility of actually dating, even getting married, but we never pulled the trigger. The distance was too much, I think. We loved each other very much. Got to the point where whether it was platonic or romantic love was difficult to tell. And weirdly, neither of us was in a rush to figure it out. I guess we both had faith it would work itself out as it was supposed to. And it did. She met a great guy, dated him, and married him. I performed the ceremony. After it was over, at the reception, I gave her a hug and she kissed my cheek and smiled a little flirtatiously. We both knew it was the last time she'd give me that look and said, "Thanks for marrying me." It was one of the most purely loving, intimate moments of my life. We are still close, not like before, but we still love each other deeply, and we always will. That love just has a more clearly defined label now, and it's a label we both respect and cherish. So yeah, it's not always a sad ending. Sometimes it's just a weird and beautiful intermission. Story 2. Did it. Dated. Broke up. Got back together. Got married. Had 5 kids. Took trips to Japan and Europe. And now as I'm dying of stage 4 cancer, she is by my side keeping me company, taking care of me. And yeah, even doing it with me still. Edit. Thanks for all the love and kind words. You guys are awesome. People are asking so, we are both 38. Our kids are 11, 10, 5 divided by 4 divided by 2. The 5 and 4-year-olds have severe autism, which makes life more challenging and interesting at the same time. I worry for them most, because the world is still not made for people like them. I would have wanted to be there to protect them always. Story 3. Hooked up with a longtime friend. She wanted to keep things platonic, so we did for a couple of years. Then she had a change of heart, so now we kiss and have intercourse sometimes. It's fun, and I think it built a lot of trust between us that we are both genuinely in the friendship no matter what. No hard feelings if we keep things platonic. No expectations for intercourse or exclusivity. We just care about each other and are here for whatever comes. And sometimes we're what comes. Story 4. Best friends for 7 years, and we both just went through really nasty breakups where we were cheated on. Ended up doing it when he came over at like 4 a.m. one night. We ended up sleeping together daily for weeks after that. I ended up pregnant, and to be honest, I was terrified. I wasn't sure if he'd be willing to stick around given the circumstances. Turns out he was excited. Having a family was all he ever wanted. We didn't start dating immediately. I didn't want us to be together solely for the fact that we were having a baby. I wanted to make sure there was an actual connection there. In October, after months of basically living together, we made it official. Baby boy is due any day now, and we couldn't be any happier. Having him come over that night in June was the best decision I ever made. Story 5. I dated her, helped deliver her daughter, raised her daughter as mine, and don't regret it. Bought a house, moved in together, she began hating being a mother and staying at home all the time. Started cheating with coworkers, got exposed by her 2-year-old daughter. Please don't even ask how. I packed my crap and left immediately. Now she makes TikToks about how crappy I am to this day. Yet the only thing I miss about that relationship is being a father to that baby. Now she's the reason I don't think I'll ever date a woman with kids or are pregnant. Nothing against those beautiful women, but I'm honestly traumatized because I still miss that kid every day. Story 6. It ruined everything. We don't talk anymore. I'm a gay man with a girl best friend. This happened 7 years ago. I guess I was a little fluid during that period of my life when it happened, but totally prefer only guys now. LOL. I broke up with my boyfriend who was cheating on me and occasionally physically hurts me in public. She was finally separated from her toxic husband who also beats her up. I had a fist fight with this dude one time and he hates my guts and forbid her from seeing me. She became a single mom and she was barely having any intercourse with anyone at that time cause of juggling work and taking care of her daughter. One night, she was insisting on sleeping over at my place, since her kid was at her parents' and she didn't want to be alone. I was like, yeah, sure, cool. We ordered dinner, watched Friends, looked at our HS yearbook, reminisced, having wine. Probably more than we were supposed to. When it was time for bed, I told her that she can sleep on my bed, and I'll just sleep on the couch like always. But for some reason she was very persistent on making me sleep on the same bed as it had enough room. And I eventually agreed. She played footsies under the sheets with me on my bed. It was kind of awkward at first cause I wasn't responding and pretending to sleep, but her hands were hovering on my chest and going down to my crotch and into my sweatpants. I don't know if it was the alcohol, her hands traveling to the base of my junk, or what, but she looked so pretty when I glanced at her and she just let out this naughty but sexy smile. I caved in and kissed her. We just made out so much, then one thing led to another and we did it. It was actually good. We kept hanging out for a few more weeks and I was developing some feelings for her. I asked her if she wanted to give it a try. I even thought to myself, I'll be fully ready to take care of her and her toddler if it worked out. But when I poured my heart out and confessed to her, she just ghosted me. I was crying for a month. Found out she has a new husband now and a second kid. They also transferred to my city and lives at the street next to mine. Story 7. He turned out to be toxic as frick but hid it very well. So we entered an abusive relationship where he would badmouth me to everyone, making everyone around us think I was the abusive one while he was aggressive with me and would humiliate me behind closed doors. By the way, I only discovered he was badmouthing me only after the relationship was over and people were treating me differently. It was the worst experience of my life. It only served to learn when to walk away. The guy had a very serious mental health problem, too, which made him slowly descend into very real madness, in the sense that I am not exaggerating when I use the word madness, which would make the cycle of violence very palpable as the moments of violence and moments of happiness would be very extreme. He was either extremely in love or extremely destructive. I ended up having to go to the police to file a restraining order against him, which made him kill himself as soon as he got it. That made his friends and family believe I had killed him, while one police officer who took my testimony said what I was describing was considered a type of false imprisonment. I used Google to translate the word carcere privado, which basically means to imprison someone when you don't have the authority to do so. We use this word for cases of kidnapping in Brazil too. Oh, and another police officer said I was lucky, yes lucky, that he didn't kill me before killing himself, something he did have ample opportunity to do on the last 2 days we spent together. So yeah, very traumatic but sobering experience. It made me have a closer contact with death, which puts everything into perspective, and made me rethink how I was living my life and relationships. Guys, it just doesn't matter if they were nice ones. If you had a very good friendship for years before hooking up, or if they are showing love you basically never had. When they turn dangerous, don't think of them as people and just escape. Don't try to be there for them or help, just escape. I mean escape, not leave. You have a very real chance of dying. Story 8. Well, she initiated it one night when we were drunk, and both of us were going through breakups. We both enjoyed it and we kept doing it off and on for most of the year. Then she started to want a relationship. I didn't, because I wanted other things out of life that I couldn't have with her. So things became awkward and she stopped talking to me. A few years later I thought about reconnecting with her, but I had been drinking that night and felt that it would be rude to drunk text her after so long. So I figured I would wait and do it later in the week. She died the next day. That was almost 6 years ago now. I miss her every day. The moral of the story, don't frick your friends. And when you want to try to reconnect with someone, just fricking do it. Don't wait. Life is too short. Hello, the editor here. That last story was too cool. Like and subscribe for more. Story 9. A couple weeks later I got assaulted, had a stroke from getting strangled during. Got pregnant, didn't know whether BF or the assaulter was the father, lost the baby, had a second stroke. Fell in the driveway during the second stroke and hit my head. And got amnesia, which was pretty total for the next year and slowly got better in following years. Though 18 years on I'm still not 100% back. He started seeing someone else after the assault. I found out years later that he blamed himself, because the day I met the guy who later assaulted me, BF had stood me up for plans to go to the Notting Hill Carnival together, and I'd gone alone, and the assaulter targeted me when I got off the bus. BF thought that if he hadn't stood me up, I wouldn't have met the assaulter. Which is true, I guess, though I don't blame him. Crap happens. He was somewhat supportive through the amnesia. I'm not sure he really believed I had it at first, but we both know I'm far too lazy to commit to a lie for long. Too much effort. We kind of drifted apart and he married the girl he started dating after we were together. Got divorced, apparently because he still had a thing for me, though he didn't admit it at the time. We hooked up a bit after his divorce, but he felt guilty for some reason. I eventually got sick of the cycle of sleeping together and then getting told that we shouldn't be, and told him I wasn't into him, which was a lie. I was stupid, and then I didn't hear from him for a couple years. I dated and fell in love with someone else, and on the night we broke up, I heard from BF for the first time in 2 years. I went up north to visit him, and the first day was great. And then he went weird on me and started avoiding me, so I left early and caught a ride home from an ex, and BF got mad and jealous at that, despite saying he had no romantic interest in me anymore. We texted a bit and he was angry for no apparent reason, so I figured I'd sort of give up on him, since my patience was running out. I took up intercourse work around this time, After I had to quit my teaching job to look after my mom, I moved to China for the summer in BF, and I kind of reconnected via text when I was out there, and he apologized for all the stuff he said. When I came back home, we met up once or twice as friends, and then he snooped in my desk and found out about the work, and handled it better than I expected. He wasn't happy, but he wasn't furious either. He decided at that point that he might love me, and we started sleeping together again. But he couldn't handle the work thing. I said, okay, I'll find another way to make money, and he said no, he'd feel too guilty. So we stopped sleeping together. He spent the next year jokingly accusing me of sleeping with, and being in love with, several other people, from all my exes to my gay roommate. Then the pandemic hit, he started dating some girl he met on a dating site, and I haven't seen him since the end of 2019, though we talk from time to time. I love him. He's been my best friend for 23 years, and I was in love with him for a large portion of that time. But the boy drives me crazy. I've never seen anyone excel quite so much at making his own misery. Apparently, he's been into me since college, but he didn't admit it for more than 15 years. He wouldn't date me in college because he thought his parents wouldn't approve. I was the wrong race, wrong religion, wrong socioeconomic bracket, and because he convinced himself I was a promiscuous man-eater who'd break his heart, even though I was a virgin at the time. After college, he backed away from me because of the assault and amnesia. Fair enough, if he thought he couldn't deal with it. But he continued to get upset at me dating others for the next 15 plus years. When he told me he was going to get married, which was a week after he told me he thought it was time for him to break up with his then GF as he didn't love her anymore. I advised him not to, and he said he felt like he owed it to her since her student visa was expiring. After his divorce, I said let's give it a shot, and he decided he felt too guilty because his feelings for me broke up his marriage. It was doomed for a bunch of reasons, but he's always been big with the guilt and self-flagellation. When we were together next time, I said I'd give up the intercourse work to be with him, and he wouldn't let me do that. It's like he's not content unless he's made himself totally miserable. On paper, it sounds like he wants to keep me on the back burner, but I'm not convinced that's what it is. He encourages me to have other relationships. He pretends he's not miserable when I do. He pretends pretty well, actually, but I've known and loved him since we were 16, and he couldn't fool me very well even back then. We've been together on and off for considerably more than half our lives at this point, but I'm too old for this crap. Relationships shouldn't be this hard. If someone really wants to be with you, they'll find a way to be with you. Story 10. My best friend as a teen was a beautiful young man. We briefly dated before becoming best friends. I took his virginity, and it was typical awkward teenage intercourse. Our friendship eventually died, and us doing it just amplified those reasons. As an adult, I think of him from time to time, but know there's no use in trying to rekindle anything. Our seasons together are over, and I'm grateful for the hard lessons and memories. I had another best friend later in life. He was like a mirror of myself. I coached him through losing his virginity to someone else. After years of being best friends, we went on a date and had incredible intercourse. We knew what each other liked because we talked about everything together. We had a falling out after I caught feelings for him. I used to wish him a happy birthday once a year, and we'd have a quick catch-up conversation, and then it'd go back to silence. He married a girl way out of his league, and they have a kid together. That's last I heard from him, over 5 years ago when he left me on read. I miss him sometimes, but I've moved on with my life. I still love the men they were when we were friends, and I wish them the best in life. If you're thinking of sleeping with your best friend, be prepared for how sour it can turn. Story 11. My best friend for almost 10 years. He is bi. I'm bi. We never really discussed our sexuality until sometime into our friendship. Eventually, he ended up telling me he's bi, and I told him I'm also bi. Nothing happened at that point. Slowly, he started introducing talk into our conversations. He worked up to asking me if he could give me oral intercourse. We talked about it a bunch, and finally I went to stay with him for a few days. He did that a few times and then talked about me topping him. I wasn't really interested in that, but he sort of pressured me into it. I couldn't perform and got really embarrassed. After I left his house, we talked about it and came to the conclusion that we should just be friends and not fool around. Shortly after that, he went absolutely ape-crap crazy on me for a political disagreement and blocked me on social media and stopped talking to me. It still bothers me a lot because I lost my best friend. Story 12. Am I the only one that has fricked many friends and am still friends with them? The people in this thread, sheesh. Yes, you need to have some unsexy conversations about feelings, needs, limits. If you draw boundaries and talk about it instead of trying to make it perfect with zero communication, it's not the hardest issue. The big problem is when both sides have different expectations walking in. I have a few extremely close friends I've fricked, and we still are extremely close friends to this day. It can make a friendship closer, and as long as you two are very direct about what it all means, it means no confusion. A good friend of mine, and I always say a friend frick is cool if it happens, but I need you as a friend first and foremost. We date separate people, and if I became monogamous with someone else, he wouldn't mind. But maybe this all applies differently when I have been non-monogamous most of my life. But I know that if I told my friends I've fricked that we would never frick again, they would be okay with it and still be my best friends. I've never understood why people say intercourse ruins everything. Never really been the case for me, except when the other person basically traumatizes you, which has nothing to do with if they are a friend or not. Story 13. I believe that you struck the nail on the head when you mentioned that you have been non-monogamous your whole life. People who practice non-monogamy are accustomed to being honest with their partners and have had those conversations with those who they have been intimate with. Those who just assume monogamy otherwise seem to be not well versed in this area. I say this as someone who is new to the area of non-monogamy. It was almost as of the moment that my partner and I opened up our relationship, it occurred to us that all relationships are constant negotiations. Before being open, we were negotiating, but we weren't verbalizing to each other how we actually felt. Instead, we were just assuming that we felt one way, and that our partner felt the same way, and that was it. Opening up changed all that. What I suppose should have been expected is that it also meant defining what that term means for us. And unsurprisingly, that definition can and will change. We watched a show the other day, and one character completely threw away their relationship because their partner kissed someone else. It was so baffling. How could one kiss completely negate everything else that this couple had shared together? Story 14. We dated a few months. He moved in with me after his lease was up but before his departure date on a big trip he'd planned long before we hooked up. Assumption was he'd come back in 4 minutes 6 moss and we'd continue on, to the point that all his things remained at my place. Then he met his now wife on said trip and started acting weird and wouldn't answer questions. Came back to town very briefly for my birthday, kept acting super weird but denied anything was different. Became clear on New Year's Eve when he changed his relationship status on socials. This was before you could link it with another person. And all our mutuals started congratulating me, but I didn't know what they were talking about until I texted him and he told me about said now wife. About 3 HRS before we were supposed to go to a concert for the holiday. He was shocked when I no longer was willing to go. There was still a lot of on and off again being friends and sometimes lovers. Their relationship is open, for several years following. But that moment and a couple others ultimately killed my ability to trust him. I haven't been in contact at all for about 5 years.